everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about safe words and aftercare, but not in a BDSM 101 format. This is going to be more of like a deep dive, response, reaction, just all of that put together because, as is what oftentimes happens online, there was somebody who was not part of the BDSM community or world that had a few hot takes about these subjects. And I am not going to really be responding to this person directly because I just find that oftentimes with kink, there are like people who are kinky and then there's anti-kink, right? People who are anti-kink, anti-BDSM, anti-CGL, anti-DDLG, anti-ABDL. For every kink, there is an anti, you get the idea. And I find that these types of people are not really open to changing their minds. They just are going to be how they are. They want to be able to say, kink is gross and bad, this kink is gross and bad, why do people do it, oh my god, ugh. And I very much got the impression that this individual person was kind of saying what they were saying, but were not open to changing anything that they thought about it. And whatever response you gave them, they were like, but, no. And my advice, guys, if you see these people online, don't waste your time. Do not try to convert them or open their minds because they probably don't really actually want to have their minds changed. They're just like, they want to talk to each other about, yeah, this thing's bad. Yeah, it is bad. You're right. And that's just like what they want to be able to do. So do not interact. Don't do that. But I think we can have a conversation about the ideas that we're going into it in like a good faith way, because there are going to be some people external to this particular individual that maybe are like, oh, that is a misconception I have. What about this? Let's talk about this more. And if you are one of those people, or you just want to be able to dive into these subjects, that's what we're going to be doing here today. So before we get any farther, let's go ahead and read the the criminal tweets. They're not really criminal, but I don't know what else to call them. Let's read the offending tweets. The concept of a safe word scares me because why doesn't no or stop suffice? And you want me to believe BDSM doesn't revolve around rape culture? What I find interesting in relation to all of this is that aftercare is so much more emphasized in the BDSM culture rather than in normal sex culture. Has it crossed your mind how that echoes abusive relationships? How abusers are able to keep their victims in a relationship? And then they give a screenshot from, it looks like ncadv.org, which says, inconsistency of abuse. During non-violent phases, the abuser may fulfill the victim's dream of romantic love. The victim may also rationalize the abuser is basically good until something bad happens and they have to, quote, let off steam. So that is what they said. That is what sparked all of this argument online. And I do think this is an important conversation. And there's so many layers to this. So I think I want to start out by maybe just like identifying what a safe word is, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings. And maybe even before that, we'll talk about like what I think in popular narrative media and things like people assume BDSM looks like, because it's hard when you're in BDSM for a long time to remember or realize like, oh, this is how people on the outside think of what we do. And you get kind of these two main ideas. You get people who think of BDSM and think of, and it's always heterosexual, there's a lot of heteronormativity in all of this, so just like realize we're talking pretty much about male dom, female submissive relationships, because people that have thoughts like this like pretty much exclude any other way of doing BDSM. But they kind of think of like this woman screaming, no, please stop. And they're like, you know, they're getting hit in the face, they're getting punched in the stomach, they're getting tossed around, they're getting thrown on the bed, they're getting really like roughed up, and then they're screaming no, and no one's out there crying. It's miserable, it's awful, it's horrible, it's like a horror movie. And then the man just like forces himself onto that person and then does whatever he wants to her right now. I will say that is a very valid fantasy. A lot of people have fantasies like this. It's very common. However, a lot of people take that and think that is what all BDSM is. That's what every BDSM relationship is really about getting to. And they also assume that it's not really ever consensual because, oh my God, you're just reenacting violence. That came up in one of the other response tweets as well, as like BDSM is just reenacting violence. So they have this picture of like a very like violent, almost like IPV-esque way that every BDSM relationship is. Now, if you negotiate for it and all the other stuff, please know that I think your relationship is valid. We're not really going to be getting into like the particulars of navigating a consensual non-consent dynamic right now because it's a whole other video, but just know that is one option. It is not the only option. The other thing that people tend to visualize is like the 50 Shades of Grey version of BDSM, which will forever stick to us and will never let go, seemingly, is like you get this like, okay, the BDSM itself might not be super intense, like it's bondage and flogging and, you know, a spreader bar, but the external relationship outside of the BDSM interactions is very toxic. And it's like a guy that has completely unaddressed mommy issues, a mental health disorder probably, like just like is not altogether, and is not really doing things in a consensual way because they aren't being honest about their motivations, and it takes until a lot later on to reveal, I'm not really a dominant, I'm a sadist, and I do this because you look like my mom who was a drug addict and she was terrible and awful. And then the woman is just like completely unaware of what's going on, very meek, very like, I don't know what's happening, and like, he's hot and rich, I guess, so I'll do it, but like, it's awful and I hate it. And even though they're like saying yes to things, or they're kind of like coerced into a yes, on the inside, the woman doesn't really like what's happening, and she's doing it because of the relationship, for sex, because the guy has money, etc., etc. And so these are the most popular ideas about BDSM that people have, and I can see how, in sort of the most charitable way I can think about this, that if that is your way you think about what BDSM looks like, you hear about a safe word, you might have this reaction of like, well, why do they have to have a safe word? Why can't they just say no or stop or whatever else? Why isn't that good enough? Why isn't that enough? And I will say that people will also assume safe word is like pineapple, right? Or just like the word safe word, and that nothing else besides that will ever stop a scene. And this is where we have to be very clear. Most people do not stop their scenes using a safe word. A safe word is a tool you can use that is a pre-negotiated either action, phrase, word, etc. that you can use to indicate this is how and when the scene needs to stop. There are many ways of doing this. Yes, things like pineapple or safe word do work for this purpose. You can also use something called a traffic light system, where it's red, green, and yellow. Red means absolutely stop, yellow means check in, green means yes, like good to go. And then you also, in addition to that, can use what is called plain English communication, or no means no, something like that, where you agree no will function as our safe word. No can also be a safe word in addition to red, safe word, like all of that, all put together. All of these things can be safe word. Doing this with your hands might be a safe word, or pinching, or tapping, or ringing a bell, or stomping your foot, or blinking 3 times in a row, or like doing Morse code, or like there's a lot of ways you can use a safe word as long as it's pre-negotiated. That might include no, stop, mercy, please don't. It could be a lot of different things. And the reason why we have so many different safe words or possible safe words to choose from is because every BDSM scene is different and has different parameters that make different safe words work better. I do want to finish this thought with like safe words and like ending scenes really quickly before I go into that. So I will say safe words are not the only way to end a BDSM scene. Where I live, at most dungeons and like every convention I've ever been to, if you say safe word or red, that is like sirens going off, everything stops, record scratch. It means something really bad happened, essentially, or the scene went really wrong, either mentally, physically, etc. And people who are there volunteering, like DMs, may need to step in, depending on the rules of the place. They may actively step in to make sure the scene stops. And that means that a safe word is not the only way that people are ending scenes, right? It is, even in personal relationships, I do know people where the goal is to get to a red or get to a safe word, and they play on a very intense level, but that is not most people's BDSM for the most part. And I advise this for people to avoid, issues in communication, is safe words are meant to be something that you use when something goes really bad or wrong and you need that to end immediately. It is a immediate, everything needs to stop, the curtains up, lights up, like this needs to be over right fucking now. And most people do not operate with their scenes going in that direction. People have a goal they want to reach. They might go to 10 strokes. They might go until they have an orgasm. They might go until, they both decide they're done. They might just kind of feel it out until the end. Or they might go until it's been like 2 hours. Like, it can be time. It can be a whole bunch of other methods of both communication, verbally, non-verbally, external goals that you set. Those can all be things that factor into a scene ending. And most people do not end their scenes routinely using a safe word, and other things, including nonverbal communication, are part of that. And as I've talked about in other videos before, a safe word is not like the way that people use safe words and the way that people do BDSM. It's not like there's this like poor put upon slave that's like sad in a corner crying, and no matter what they say, no matter what they do, however they act, they can be on the floor sobbing, please, no more, I can't take it, and be like legitimately actually miserable and hating every moment of it. And no matter what they do or say or beg or whatever, their dominant, their master, whoever, will not stop unless they say a safe word. That's not it. There are some people who do play like that. There are, always outliers, always exceptions to the rule, but I would say for the most part, people do not really have scenes or relationships like that, because a safe word is a tool. It is a tool in your toolbox for making communication better. That does not mean you ignore every single nonverbal or verbal cue besides that. You have to be very attuned to your partner to do BDSM in a safe manner. That means knowing their nonverbal tells. That means understanding their normal communication patterns and when and how those might change, or how they react to certain stimuli. This is why having a really in-depth negotiation before playing is so important, because some people are going to be very laughy and giggly and bubbly and dancing around, and maybe they talk back a little bit and they're very, very active in their scenes, just like naturally. And other people are very quiet, they're very internal, they do a lot of internal processing during their BDSM. Both ways, again, totally valid. However, if one of those people who normally has a certain routine suddenly starts to change during the scene, and maybe the bubbly, lively one suddenly becomes very quiet and downcast, maybe they're kind of holding themselves and like rocking back and forth, but not in like an energetic way, but in like a self-soothing way, that's a sign to check in. And if the really quiet one who normally doesn't make a sound suddenly starts screaming, that's also going to be a sign to check in. So you also have to pay attention to those nonverbal and verbal tells and be able to kind of intuit a little bit, okay, do I need to check in? And this is where check-ins also play a role in our factor here. Is a lot of people do, like, especially if they're really into heavy role play, do not really like checking in because it breaks the mood of the scene. It's like having, a wall breaking moment during a play or something where it's like, oh, okay, these are actually actors, what's happening here? And that can be upsetting, especially if there wasn't a need for a check-in and then it happens anyways. You're like, oh, I kind of lost the mood. To me, though, I much prefer taking the risk of breaking a scene space over like violating a boundary or going too far and like breaking somebody because I didn't check in. But that's me just personally speaking. And you can check in and like when you see those tells, like, hey, like, are you okay? What's going on? Like, do you still like this? How you feeling? How you doing? Like, you can keep it casual. You can be more serious, more direct. It depends on like what makes sense with the scene you're doing. But if somebody stops responding or they can only cry in response, like, even if they're having a good time, that might mean it's time to kind of wind the scene down a little bit, It might be, okay, we got to a certain point, they're not really communicating, they're going nonverbal. We haven't really talked about this beforehand, so to be safe, we're going to kind of cool down and start to end the scene. So safe words are really just a tool at the end of the day. And the reason they exist is because accidents and miscommunication happens. And this is a tool that we use to avoid harm and hurt that is not wanted because of communication errors. And this happens all of the time in vanilla sex, in vanilla relationships, not just in BDSM. And in fact, I would argue the kinds of things that safe words are meant to prevent can actually happen even more in vanilla interactions. And by the way, being vanilla, not a bad thing, just means that you're not doing BDSM, not doing kink. That's going to be most people, totally normal, totally cool on this channel as far as I'm concerned. But oftentimes, because vanilla interactions, like the ideal that has been just perpetuated everywhere in media, from movies, books, romance novels, TV shows, like you name it, music videos, like who cares? All of it. The idealized version of an interaction is you're so passionate, you can just kind of go with the flow and not even say anything to each other, and you just like, you both somehow magically like mind-readingly know what is it the exact perfect right thing to do. And talking beforehand and planning out an interaction can be something that breaks the mood, is seen as like you're not really a good lover because you had to ask first, you should just know, and yada yada. There's a lot of judgment and a lot of assumption that goes into interactions like that. And it can just lead to bad outcomes, because when you don't really know someone that well, somebody in that moment could say, no, please don't. And it could be a playful, no, please don't. And what that really is shorthand for is like, please, I can't take this anymore, but it feels so good. I also don't want you to stop, and it's confusing in it. Like, interactions, even vanilla interactions that involve intense genital experiences, they can be very confusing mentally to process between pain and pleasure and overstimulation and the exact right amount of stimulation, and it gets very confusing. So you have to be careful when somebody says, no, please stop, because if you have in the past, like, you know, you had a partner or something where like that was their key word where it actually really meant please keep going, in vanilla culture, checking in that moment would not be a good thing to do, because you would be, you know, ruining the mood, or they lost their orgasm or something, right? And then you, okay, I'm just going to keep going because I don't really know. And so you have these miscommunications that happen, but because nothing is really discussed up front, it can vary and oftentimes lead to a lot of hurt feelings and broken boundaries and like really terrible violations. And BDSM recognizes that these accidents can happen not just because somebody is like a mean person or a violator or they're selfish or anything like that. It can just happen, right? Because like this shit is confusing and hard to navigate, and we want things that will make that navigation easier. And so we talk beforehand and agree, when I say no or stop, that might not actually mean no or stop. I want this other word, safe word, red, pineapple, kumquat, whatever. I want that to really mean I want the scene to end and stop right there. And that's really what that's going to do. So we can play around with these other words that might be fun and might be helpful for processing. Because even outside of kink, a lot of people use no, stop, please don't, ow, ouch, whatever, to be processing words, right? Like when you stub your toe, it might not really hurt that much, but you might reflexively say, ow, what the fuck? Like, not actually because it hurt that much, but because that external processing helps you get through that very temporary discomfort. Or when you get a really deep tissue massage, you might be, oh, fuck, that really hurts, or ow, or you might kind of wiggle around and wince, and like, you might seem like you are really in pain and want it to stop, but you don't really want it to stop because you know the benefits at the end are what you want to get to, and you're willing to like endure this pain or discomfort temporarily because of what will come out on the other side. And saying things like, ow, no, oh, I don't really like that, might be just a way of you processing getting through that temporary discomfort. And it can also happen with other things as well, right? Like it can be, you might say, no, please don't. And again, I keep going to that example, so maybe I shouldn't anymore. But like, when you're like tickling, you know, a sibling or a friend or a partner, or you're in a pillow fight, right? Like you might very playfully say, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? And that does not mean stop right now. That's having fun, which is a normal process of what BDSM is about. And that might seem kind of strange because BDSM can get really deep and dark, and like it can go in some dark directions, to be clear. But I really think that underneath all of BDSM, even that really kind of dark, like, you know, mindfuckery stuff, I think underneath all of that is a level of connection and fun and play. That might seem strange, but I really kind of think about BDSM as being this like space where as an adult you can play and experiment and do kind of like silly things. And this is a key way that a lot of people bond with their partners. This is part of like, you know, human bonding in general, really, especially when you are with an intimate partner doing stuff like this. Getting to kind of play fight almost is kind of what it is. You know, you might playfully say no or stop in the same way that like two lion cubs playing together, you know, one of them might roll on their back to play being dead when they're not really actually dead, right? It's part of that play. It's part of that mutual fun and discovery process of getting to kind of play around with boundaries. And, you know, it's something as well that a lot of people find enjoyable about BDSM is it lets you kind of in a safe way test these more murky waters that you don't necessarily have control over in your everyday life, where, you know, it might be fun to play around with no and stop while you actually know that in your everyday real life, those no's and those stops and those please don'ts will actually be respected and be respected in that relationship. So it's very complicated why people use safe words and why they're necessary and how they work. But to me, if anything, you know, this accusation, this idea that they are part of rape culture somehow, that no and stop aren't good enough, which isn't even true for safe words, that is somehow pro-rape culture. It's not. It's anti-rape culture, in my opinion, because it requires negotiation. It requires talking before an interaction. It requires a very clearly laid out, if I say this, everything must stop, or in the case of like yellow, green, etc., these other conditions must happen. And so I kind of get, like, I want to be sympathetic towards people who have this opinion, because I can see if you have that mentality of, you know, BDSM is this horrible, awful thing of like a man doing whatever he wants because he's a sadist and he needs an outlet. Like, you might think of safe words and really legitimately think about, okay, why do no and stop not really stop things? But they can be, because no and stop are the most basic safe words there are. And I think that if you're doing BDSM and you have not negotiated otherwise and you made a mistake, you didn't talk about safe words or something, that happens. If you hear a no or a stop, you should always stop and at least check in, if not end the scene. Because if you don't really know anything else and you haven't talked about a different safe word, those should be kind of treated as the default safe words. And I think for most people, they do, relatively speaking, treat them in that fashion. So I think that's really what I want to say about safe words. But safe words are really just a way of like reducing ambiguity, giving you clear communication tools, and they just let you play in the sandbox and know where those boundaries of the sandbox are. And know if you go past that, there's a thing to kind of stop it from going too far. So I love safe words. I think they're great. I think even in vanilla interactions, I know people that use safe words when they make jokes with friends. And so that way you have a clear way of signaling, hey, this joke went too far. It is useful for so many people, not just in BDSM, but with friends and other parts of relationships you might have, romantic partners, where you can say, hey, you know, I'm not really, and don't go there, it's too far. And I think that is wonderful that we have this versatile tool to use to make our interactions that much better. Okay, so that's safe words. Let's go ahead and talk about the aftercare point. So I gotta say, I'm probably gonna be less charitable with this one, because I don't know, like, it is bananas to me that you would look at aftercare and then look at a description of like an IPV cycle and then go, these are the same thing. Like, I'm sorry, what now? So again, I think maybe part of this is misunderstanding the role that aftercare plays in a BDSM relationship and in scenes. So aftercare is the care that you do after a scene. It could be literally anything from getting a glass of water to cuddling and watching a movie to a massage to just like talking about the scene. Aftercare can look like basically anything that you want. It is just there as a tool to help you kind of like re-regulate after an intense experience and, just kind of like come back to reality a little bit. And this is like, it is only very superficially similar to the like honeymoon period of an abuse cycle. And the way that I think these things kind of maybe overlap in people's minds is they very in like the most basic way possible go. BDSM is when something bad happens to you, and then afterward your partner has to make up for the bad thing they did to you by giving you something that you like or want as like a bribe to keep you in the relationship. And that's basically the same thing as like abuse, where something bad happens to you, and they basically make this comparison. But the function of aftercare is not making up after a bad experience or like coercing somebody to stay in a bad relationship by giving them the thing they really want. The BDSM is the thing they wanted. The steps are upside down here. Like, the BDSM, the scene, is the thing they wanted. The aftercare might also be a nice bonus. That warm, glowy, connected feeling might also be really good, but they also want the first thing that happened too. And so it's not really like, oh, sorry, baby, I didn't mean to hurt you. Like, it's not like that at all. It's like, you are just coming back down after an intense experience, and you need something sometimes to help you regulate and reconnect with the everyday world. And there are so many examples of things that are synonymous to this in everyday life, right? Like, if you have ever gone to a yoga class and you've done like an hour-long kind of deep meditation where you've been meditating for a really long time, there's a moment at the end, and I want to say it's Shavasana. I don't remember what the word is, but you basically like, it's about lying back and like reconnecting to your body before you have to go back out into your everyday life because of that mental experience where you went to kind of a different place almost, and then you have to come back down to reality. Is meditation abuse? I would say no. Now, there can be a lot of abuse within, yogi culture, the like meditation circles, whatever that is, that can be a thing. But meditation itself, like the leader of the meditation is not abusing you because they put you in this like mentally different place and then brought you back to reality a little bit before having to go drive in your car for 30 minutes in traffic before you get home. Like, that's not how it works. Like, when you draw blood at the doctor's office, or when you donate blood or something, you get like a snack or a juice afterwards. That doesn't mean the doctor abused you. It means that like, something physically happened and you need to kind of replenish your body after that happens. In the same way, BDSM can be very physically intense, though also enjoyable at the same time, because throwing a flogger for an hour will wear out your shoulder, or having to process getting spanked for an hour. That's going to take some effort and energy, and your body needs to get that energy back sometimes to feel kind of right in the world. Like, it's very oftentimes true that people will, go out and have like a shake or a burger or something after they do a heavy scene because it helps, kind of replenish and regulate again. Or like, if you're going on a really scary roller coaster at a theme park and it's, it's so high and so terrible. And then like, it might be scary, but also this is like the most direct thing with BDSM, I think, of all the examples I'm going to give, is roller coasters are fun and scary. BDSM can be fun and scary. Roller coasters are not typically a tool of abuse, but after you go on them and you go through these emotional swings of terror and fear and delight and more fear, and you go back and forth, you might want to go to, the stand and get some cotton candy or a churro or something and get a little sugar in you, and then kind of go sit on a bench somewhere and go, whew, that was like fun, and like, I think I want to do it again. And that is very much how BDSM can feel. But really, the most obvious example that matches with a vanilla experience is post-coital pillow talk. Like, after you maybe have a really intense 9-minute long... Sorry, I should not in this video in any way poke at vanilla people and sex, because I don't want to come across like I'm like, BDSM is better and sex is dumb, because I don't think that, but like, just the average length of intercourse is whatever. We're just moving on. If you have an intense sex experience that is vanilla, and it lasts for like 30 minutes. You know, you do all the stuff beforehand, foreplay, he kisses your foot, he does all this other stuff, you know, goes down on you, then you have sex, and it takes a long time, right? You might even feel a bit like tingling in your hands afterwards. You might feel like you're on cloud nine and you're floating, and oh my god, all the orgasms, so amazing, so wonderful. And afterwards, you like reconnect physically, and you talk to each other, and maybe you cuddle in bed for a little bit, or you order dinner out or something, and like that is basically what aftercare is for BDSM, but it is like elevated to be proportional to what happens during a BDSM scene. So, in summary, no, aftercare is not part of the cycle of abuse. If you talk to anyone that has been through IPV or has done BDSM, you would realize that they are very, very just not even, like, they are very, very not even on the same planet. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But they are very dissimilar. They do not in any way connect in terms of, like, motivation, emotional content, how it actually happens, what actually happens, the after effects of it. Like, none of that is in any way similar. They are very different. They might appear to be the same because man hits a woman apparently can only ever be construed in one way for some people. So, aftercare is not abuse. Safe words are not rape culture. I rest my case. Now, I want to just, like, I just want people to, when they are talking about something that they are not a part of, that they don't really understand, I would like it if they could maybe listen to members or even just a member of that community and actually listen to what they have to say. Because I find that oftentimes, especially when somebody really digs in their heels about this, there is no argument that could ever change their mind because they only ever conceive of BDSM as being man doing something to a woman she doesn't like, and then after that they think because of this rape culture, patriarchy, etc., that means no woman can ever really consent to doing anything kinky, any sort of BDSM relationship, and also even if they can technically consent, they shouldn't because it's bad for them and it's like, you know, reenacting violence on women and normalizing violence, and it's reinforcing the patriarchy. And like, we had these arguments in the 1980s. Can we please leave that shit in the 80s? Thank you. Like shoulder pads and I don't know what else. Like, just no, sorry. We had this argument already. I thought we got over it. And at the end of the day, as fellow human beings on Earth, it is probably, in my mind, a bad idea to decide an entire category of people is incapable of consenting to something because of the nebulous idea of reinforcing the patriarchy. Like, that's just... Now, there are ways of doing BDSM and motivations behind BDSM that I don't personally agree with, that I do think might play into that a little bit more. Like, there are people who do BDSM because they believe in, like, the matriarchy, and they believe that women are inherently, on a biological level, better than all men. And there are men who believe, likewise, that women are the inferior member of the species, and they should always be subservient to all men, and they believe that the patriarchy is the way to guide BDSM. I literally saw somebody in FetLife the other day that, and I haven't seen this before, to be clear, this is not common, but I did see somebody post a really detailed personal ad on FetLife, and it was like, you went to their profile and it was all about how women are meant to serve men, and I was like, oh, that's why you're not getting any responses. It's because you're literally just a misogynist. Okay. And like, the BDSM community, like, for the most part, and I've talked about this in other videos, I think that we do a lot of really good work to break down, and we're not perfect, but we do actually try to break down the walls of heteronormativity, of the patriarchy, of racism, and like, there's always more work to be done, but we are conscious of this. We think about this as individual members and as people in the community. We think about, where do our kinks come from? Why am I like this? And like, this is why it's funny to me when people say, oh, well, like, if you think kink is all right, like, you need to think very deeply about why you have to, like, put your dick in a bear trap in order to be able to get off. And it's like, First of all, not really a thing that happens, though I'm sure it does happen for some people, in fantasy at least. But most of us are here and in the world of BDSM because we had to have a lot of very uncomfortable internal personal conversations about who we are, what we want in relationships, and how we don't really fit into mainstream society's ideas about what relationships should or can look like. And you know, it's like everyone that I've personally met in the BDSM world is like a really introspective, very, you know, well-rounded person that has thought a lot about what goes into their kink and why they do what they do and what that means about who they are. Like, none of this, for the most part, comes completely out of nowhere, completely unaddressed. Like, it takes people a lot of work to be able to be comfortable with who they are oftentimes, and what they want, and why BDSM is something they're into. And so, like, it's just like the judgment is so unnecessary. The judgment is just so unnecessary. So I think I've been rambling for quite a while now. I hope that you all learned something in this video about safe words, aftercare, why we use them, and maybe dispelling some ideas about like when and how safe words get used, and like aftercare, and like what purpose it serves. Because like, I guess, I don't know, it's just one of those things where like, it's obvious to me because I've been stewing in this as my fucking job for so long that I'm like, oh yeah, I guess people might think that safe words because of like how it gets extrapolated from like TV shows to, you know, conversations to TikTok videos. And so people think, oh, safe words are in BDSM to stop a scene. Therefore, the only way to stop a BDSM scene is with a safe word. Okay, and it's like, no, it's not really. We need to have more conversations about this. It's not actually true, at least for most people. So, yeah, that is everything for now, guys. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I would love to know your thoughts about this in a comment down below. What do you think about safe words, aftercare, this whole conversation? I would love to know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, if you've not already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related content. And finally, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, if you want to support what I do on this channel, I would go ahead and check out my Patreon. A link to that will be down below. We have tons of fun rewards over there. I have tons of written guides on there. I have movie recommendations, book recommendations, tons of live streams and bonus videos every month, and it's a really, really fun place. And if you do already support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.